Booktube. I'm Scott.
I'm Nelle.
We are Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and we're going to talk about...
A nerdy stats video, yes.
We're going to talk about whether we read diversely or not, and how Black Lives Matters affected our reading stats. Do you want to take us through your stats?
So, if you've been paying attention, you know that I've been sort of trying to be conscious of my buying, but I haven't actually set myself any quotas or any goals or anything about my reading. So in theory, I could still be reading very Caucasian, straight.
So I think the interesting thing about what you're doing is I think it will actually have a delay on when you get to...
I'm really interested in the statistics. I think it will be interesting to see the mechanics of how it works on my brain as an individual, as opposed to the mechanics of how quotas work within a group.
Yeah.
But nerdy plus. But let's look at my stats for sort of the first half of the year before it even entered my consciousness. I read 23 books in the first half of the year. 69.57% of those were written by female authors and just over 30% by male authors.
So 70-30, essentially. Round that off.
Yeah. And none by anyone who was transgender or non-binary or in the other category.
Yes.
I was 95.65% straight reading.
Whoa.
Literally one of my books in the first half of the
it.
year was written by a queer author. It wasn't on my...
Yeah, it wasn't on your radar, and you didn't
it wasn't
realise.
something I was thinking about, and I guess the baseline for my personal was nothing queer. And then similarly, I was 74% white and 26% people of colour. So it was only 6 out of the 23 that I read people of colour.
Now, I'll tell you something that I noticed when I was doing the stats for me, which I don't know if you noticed or not, but when we broke these up into the half yearly, I noticed that in May, I had read a lot of people of colour. And when I looked at what was going on, May was when we did the Asian readathon.
It was the Asian readathon. So I can almost guarantee you that all 6 of those, if not all of them, then close to all of them, will be Asians, and they'll be in May.
So probably 5 or 6 of them will be Asian.
Yeah. So that is all in the first half of the year.
Now, how did the second half of the year go?
So the second half of the year, as far as gender goes, I'm still pretty much 70% female, but I'm down to 17% male, and I have some non-binary and trans representation, almost as much as my male representation, which I'm pretty happy with, actually. If it was I'm glad it's stole from the male pot and not the female pot. It's just the personal satisfaction. I don't know if that's the best diversity I can hope for, but it's my personal best. Scott's stats will be much better than my stats because he read significantly more.
Because I'll have a bigger sample size, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm up to 2/3 straight and 1/3 queer, which is not great, but is a huge improvement.
I think that's excellent, actually. If you're trying to read... The thing is with reading diversely is that if you're reading queer, then you have to read, queer person of colour.
I get what you're saying, but there's actually such a diverse
I'm so
array.
glad you understood from that very bad
it was. There's such a diverse array of experiences in sort of the queer community that I have no other way of really empathizing with or gaining access to, I guess.
Yeah.
That I feel like, for me personally, I'm not aiming for 50-50. I actually think that queer books should dominate my reading. I have a straight perspective. I live in a heterosexual marriage.
Yeah, but you're not Ghanese, so
No,
then...
I'm not, and there is, like, nationality is a huge one, and heritage is a huge one for reading diversely, but also, like, we have family members who are queer that I would really like. Part of this is about learning for them and learning so that I can empathise better with their experience and that sort of thing. So that one's really important to me. Yeah.
Okay, so that's something that you actually really want to improve on.
Yeah, I really like, even if it's only for the next few years, not necessarily for the rest of my life, but I would like to learn more about the queer community and queer rights and the history of queer rights, as part of just being a better feminist, a better person, a better relative, all of those things.
Yeah, one of the ideas I had, we were talking about this today off camera, but I said instead of trying to read diversely, what I might consider doing next year, just an idea I had, was to read one aspect of society that was, so for example, I could read just gay men or just South American authors and just really delve into that for 2 months and then move on to another
segment of society.
And so not worrying about being diverse, just hitting one section that is...
Yeah, like really learning.
Like Courtney Ferreter is reading Arab American authors in 2021. I think that's excellent because that is a great way of just... Because you can't say that I have a perspective on Egyptian authors if you've read one book by an Egyptian author, you
exactly.
know? But...
Yeah,
so.
I do think that's a good way to look at it. The other way that I liked, we were watching Sean, the Bookmaniac's New Year's Eve get-together.
Yeah.
And Britta said that at the end of the year she looks at her stats and sees where the gap is so that she can focus on the gap next year. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. These stats are not a pass or fail for me. These are, where's the gap? Where do I need to focus next year?
They're feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And so you just sort of readjust your reading and what's on your... and look for things that haven't been on your radar to make sure that you're continually diversifying, I guess.
Yeah. So the reason we've broken this up into the first and the second half of the year also is because Black Lives Matter happened in the middle of the year.
Well...
And
one of the many events that have...
Yeah, it actually happened almost a decade ago, but...
there was...
hit the news headlines.
There was a big event in the middle of the year and a big push on Booktube to be reading diversely, and we took that really to heart. So my stats... I just want to remind myself, what was the first half of the year? 74-26.
74% white, 26% person of colour.
And I've gotten that to 60-40.
60-40. So you've improved it, but there's a lot of, by the look of this, there's a lot of straight white females you're reading. Yes,
absolutely. I can actually see a couple of patterns in the straight white authors. I've got a lot of Margaret Atwood because I committed earlier in the year to try and read all of Margaret Atwood by April. That's not going to happen.
Also, the thing is, with dealing with this sort of... You've grown up and you have developed favourite authors.
Yeah, so I had in place Margaret Atwood, Natasha Pulley, who I discovered earlier in the year, and I've got, like... those people who appear more than once on my list. Next year, I can see that the people who will appear more than once on my list are going to be people like Octavia Butler and Shauna Maguire and River Solomon. So many people that I've discovered this year who are either releasing new books or who have so much back catalogue for me to read. So I think that next year it'll change again.
Yeah, well, that's how we theorised it would be.
Yes.
As and the more you discover authors who have different perspectives, surely the more you read them.
You would think,
because it doesn't matter what colour you are, what sexuality you are. Some people are better writers than other people, and
yes, and some of them will be my favourites, and some of them won't.
And yeah, so you just like, it's just that you just try new authors and you find new authors that you like, and hopefully you find more of colour. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you, with your TBR buying, significantly improved your stats. It's fair to say.
Yes.
You added a huge proportion of non-binary authors. What did you do? Your straight to queer numbers went from basically non-existent to 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, which is just that's really good. I'm really happy with that.
And your white to POC was 60-40 in the end. And what did you say it started at?
74-26.
So you've improved that by 15. So that's actually probably the least improved out of
all of them.
All of them. Which is interesting because it was Black Lives Matter
that spurred the whole thing,
right? And Black Lives, but this is also, Black Lives Matter has helped you read queer literature
completely, and put on my radar for once this project. I committed to 100 books for this first project of buying. Once that is finished, my next commitment will be around diversity of ability and disabled authors and disabled representation. I think because that is a category that I just completely ignored when setting up the project and would like to fix that.
Yeah, I noticed that I read one book by a disabled person this year, and that was all I could say when I was going through this, but I didn't do it as a stat.
It is an intentional thing. So what were your stats like? Now,
so at the start of the year, I already had a goal to read more women because I noticed that last year I was reading very dude heavy, and I wanted to fix that up. So for the year, I read... So firstly, actually, let me have a little rant, right? I, like a lot of people, use Goodreads to track the number of books I read. And Goodreads sets you this arbitrary target. And I tell you, I could care less about how many books I read, except that Goodreads has put a number down there. Now, I set that number to 80 last year. After I achieved 80 way before the year was up, I said, well, the last few years I've made 150. I wonder if I can make 150 this year, right? And at the end of the year, I had 154 books, and I thought I had achieved it, right? But I knew that I had 2 DNFs that Goodreads had counted, so I knew it was actually 152. Now, when I did this list, I found out that I only had 149 books, and I was murderous. I was so angry because I had missed my target because Goodreads had lied to me. And
you totally had time to read another book.
I could have just picked up a short book and finished it, but there was Christmas stuff going on, there was videos to make for Vlogsmas. I did not prioritize. I would have prioritized reading that extra book.
Yeah.
Right? But
just to get your little cross off.
Just to get my cross off. It would have been important to me.
Yeah.
Right? I could have read a play or something quick. It would have been easy.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is Goodreads just, frankly, being shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Amazon, go fuck yourself.
I've been a little bit anti their data as well, so we might start a blog or something that counts our books this year, I think.
I think there'll be changes with that because we're pretty anti-Amazon as it is.
Yeah.
But it just annoyed me because I didn't care about how many books I read until they made me care about it.
Yeah. Also, they don't count anything that I want to count. All they count is...
I don't mind knowing the number of pages.
Yeah, I don't hate that, but they don't count...
Yeah.
Diversity, they don't count...
This is actually a big project to figure out...
Yeah.
Who was what, and searching, blah, blah, gay, blah, blah, queer, blah, blah,
and they've
bisexual.
got like a wiki of all the data of the books. Having that, like, it annoys me. It's a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've said this more than once.
So for the year, I read 54% women, 44% men, 2% non-binary. And for the second half of the year, I actually read less women, and my non-binary, I read all 3 of my non-binary, and I stole from my women instead of my men. See, I've got much worse internalized misogyny than you.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me.
Who
does it benefit?
Misogyny benefits me. Yeah,
exactly.
That's it. So, yeah, I think those numbers are too... I mean, I'm not going to focus on the gender breakdown now, but because I've achieved it.
To be honest, I've never focused on the gender breakdown other than to try and look for trans and non-binary authors, and mentally I sort of group that with searching for queer authors. In a strange, I guess, because of the acronym.
Yeah.
But I've always read more heavily female, and my bookshelf is very heavily male, which is interesting. I wonder if that's because that's all the books I avoid.
Do you know what I actually think it is? I think when I first started really reading, I wanted to read all the classics, and if you want to read split genders from the classics, it's much harder to, it's much easier to, you can just fall down a hole of just reading men if you're reading the classics. So you have to actually hunt out women and stuff, and I didn't hunt out, I didn't do anything, I just grabbed books. Yeah. And then, a lot of those books you've got from,
yeah, I rummage,
And then there's a whole heap of books that I bought you because I wanted you to read them and stuff, or
lots of classics. I don't think I ever really had a Jones for the classics, but I do have a lot of classics that you've gifted me at some point.
Yeah, hoping that you would read them so we can discuss them.
Because you liked them, so...
And knowing that now I'll have to reread them because I've forgotten them.
Sorry.
That's alright. As regards straight versus queer for the year, I had 85% straight, 13% queer, 2% unknown, because essentially if anybody can tell me or tell us what Octavia Butler's sexual orientation
No,
was,
it's unknown. It's unknown. No one knows. Yeah. You can't prove it. She's dead.
Well, exactly.
So
we've just got to not count her in the stats.
I'm counting everyone who is unknown as straight, white, cis, because if it's not declared as representation, then it's not representation.
Well, anyway, I increased my queer rep by 2%. So
in the second half
of the year, which is actually a significant difference, because if you actually look at I read a lot more books in the second half of the year, but if you look at the numbers, I read 20 queer books, 14 of them in the second half of the year.
Yeah, so that's a huge change.
It's a huge... But I actually, if you look at the numbers, I read 92 books in the second half of the year, and I read 149 books for the whole year. So what's that, 57 in the first half, 92 in the second half.
Yeah, whereas my reading was very close to evenly split.
So, yeah, but I wasn't evenly at all.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit better, but really that's pretty close to the same. And as far as white versus people of colour, I read 71% white in the start of the year, 71% white in the second half of the year. It did not change.
That's terrible.
That's terrible. So what I was doing was just trying to be conscious of reading some representation. So this was me trying to do the easy thing, trying to be aware.
Not setting quotas, just trying to make the right decisions, knowing that you should make the right decisions.
And we've seen a tiny nominal improvement in my queer reading.
Yeah.
And no improvement at all in my person of colour reading. Now I can say that Asian Readathon probably boosts up the number of POCs I read in the first half of the year.
Yeah.
But really...
You should be doing better than that.
That is not an improvement that I'm happy with. That's not representative. Yeah. So I have my task. I have a big list of books, which hopefully will be posted or has been posted on our YouTube channel by the time this goes up, or it's scheduled by the time this goes up. Pardon me. Which is aimed at giving me a list of queer authors or queer books to just cross off as the year goes.
Yeah.
And the same with people of colour. But yeah, so I haven't improved at all, and you have significantly improved. So we can see that your TBR project worked.
yeah, I think that I definitely think that getting excited about books by people of colour and by queer folk, by hunting for them and buying titles by those people and having them come into the house, and like the new book is the exciting book, you know. Everyone's always talking about ignoring their backlist. I totally ignored my backlist, and it's worked out really well for my diversity. So
well, that and the other thing I do is I deliberately have a goal to make sure that I read the oldest books on my backlist, or to DNF the oldest books.
Yeah,
or
so
to
that
unhaul
you're
them.
clearing that out. Well, and I guess that's probably the next part of this. Once I've finished purchasing my 100 books, I intend to go through my TBR shelf and unhaul anything that is dated that I won't read. There's definitely at least one author on there that is now on the shit list. And potentially two. Someone I'm undecided about whether I'll read or not.
Who are you undecided about?
I'm pretty sure I won't read the John Boyne book that I've got.
Yeah, I think after
the article that Jen Link does too, it really makes it difficult to...
Yeah, I think, basically, if we posted a video November or December, I forget where it was, where we discussed, it might have been the problematic authors tag.
Yeah, it might have been.
And we discussed John Boyne, and we compared John Boyne's attitudes to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and J.K. Turfling.
Yeah.
And we said that we thought that was better. And Jen, the librarian, said she actually thought that was more harmful, and gave us facts and stuff. And it was like, it was really good to me.
Yeah, it was really good.
You've got to listen to people when they're...
It was absolutely the whole reason that we're part of Booktube, is to have that kind of conversation. So that was really interesting. But I'm pretty sure he's on the shit list now too.
I think he has to go on the shit list,
yeah.
unfortunately.
But in addition to that, I also have a massive selection of David Eddings books that I don't think I'm going to read. Like, that's not where my interests are anymore. And just a few...
Just because your tastes have developed with time.
Yeah, and changed. And I had a few years off reading, and books that I'd bought beforehand, and books that you've been gifted over the years, and all that sort of thing. So I think that will be the final step of the project, is to do a bit of an unhaul.
Yeah.
And watch all the men disappear.
White man gone, white man gone, white man
bye. Which isn't the intent, but I imagine will be part of the outcome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it'll be interesting when you're doing that unhaul to see if you unhaul anybody who is a person of colour, or who is queer, or...
Yeah, well, there'll be at least one person of colour.
Well, unfortunately, you can't listen to TERFs.
Can't. Sorry, it's not a thing.
I won't say who we're talking about, but I think it's obvious.
Yeah. And that'll change the stats again. So I think I don't know. I think we're all nerds on Booktube. We all really like the stats at the end of the year, and to do all the next, I guess, more frivolous update I'm looking forward to is to have a look at my map.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, because that is a project that I definitely prioritised.
Yeah, I didn't at all. So I suspect you were already ahead of me. I suspect that lead will have really grown this year, because you read so much more than me, and with such a stronger focus on that.
Well, I made sure I got at least one new country a month in 2020, and I know I did 2 or 3 in some months.
Yeah, I don't think I can say that I did 1 a month, but maybe I did, because I certainly read quite a few countries in Asian Readathon. And anyway, that'll be another video. We'll go through our all count and see how far we got with that.
Yeah.
Redo the maps.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been an interesting experiment. I'm glad to be able to be a bit more proactive now, because I had decided to do this experiment, and I felt like I was like deliberately not do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. When you start to see that you really do need a quota.
I could see towards the end that this was not that it wasn't working.
So are you going to commit to a quota? Do you know how you're going to do that yet?
Yeah, so I have a list of, I've got 50 books from authors of colour and 20 books from LGBT that I have to read
this year.
I'm going to post that video relatively soon. That were those lists that I was making.
I remember, yeah.
Now that I have these stats, I may even actually up them. I found it quite hard to get a list of, but I might have to haul some books is actually the issue, because what I was doing was I was going through my catalogue of what I had and all of that, because I wanted to prioritise reading them first, but actually I clearly need to prioritise hauling them.
You need to change your percentages, so yeah, maybe you need to add.
Yeah, because what will happen is as I prioritise through my backlist stuff, all my backlist stuff will be like old white dudes.
Yeah, so you're going to end up in the same position you're in this year.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit better, but...
Yeah, so I'll have to deal with that. Yeah, but looking at that and looking at what my goals are, I think I might need to up those numbers just a little bit. Because I said I had those lists, but I full on expected to read... Additional authors off those than on those lists. And
especially with things like the Invisible Cities project and...
Well, yeah, with Invisible Cities, I think it is basically impossible for me not to read authors of colour that aren't on that list, because I don't know what cities are going to come out next and what countries are going to come out next, and so I can't put them on the list.
Yeah.
I mean, I could guess and put them on the list, I guess, but it kind of defeats the purpose anyway. Like,
yeah,
I kind of like the surprise and then going, ooh. I have to spend some time researching Egyptian literature now and figuring out who I'm interested in and who I'm going to buy. Like, awesome.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. Anyway, we've definitely crapped on for a long time. So that's the end of this video, I think. If you got to the end, please give us a like, give us a thumbs up. And if you're new here, subscribe. What do we have to ask a question of? What can they comment on?
What stats do you track? Are you angry that Goodreads can't count? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, if you want to stab Goodreads for any reason, let me know, and let me know where you'd stab them.
Okay, we're out of here.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, you've got it.